Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Couzens and today I'm going to be talking to you about flash duration. So what is a flash duration? Well, simply put, it's the length of time that the flash gives out light in one burst. So how is this helpful to us? Well, if we want to capture some kind of movement within our frame, our flash can far exceed the speed at which movement can be captured. And that is amazing when you really want to freeze the action and get a real crisp, clean image. It can all be done with flash. Now, I'm using a Profoto B10, and at the lowest power, around sort of power level 2, I can get up to 1/50,000th of a second, where of course the fastest shutter speed on my camera is 1/8,000th of a second. So you can see there's a huge difference. So when photographing fast-moving subjects and I want to capture movement, my choice of light is going to be the Profoto B10. Now within the Profoto B10, we have a mode called freeze mode. Now hang on with me because we're going to get a bit techie, but what we've got to think about is something called a flash curve. Now what happens is that we have literally a curve. When your flash fires, it comes up, it peaks, and then it drops off again and has a tail. Now what happens when we go into freeze mode is that we go in and we get the peak of the exposure and then we cut off on the way back down again and we get rid of the tail end of the flash curve and we just don't need that part. So that enables us to have a shorter flash duration. Now something else happens here though while we're doing that is that on this second curve and on the tail that we're chopping off, that's where the warmer light is. So you may find that your images appear slightly cooler than they do when you're in the normal mode, but that's fine because I just compensate with that with my white balance instead. Now one thing we need to remember here too is that we want to keep our lights on a very low power. The reason being, the lower the power, the faster the flash duration. Another thing that's important here too is we want to cut out all the ambient light in the room. So we just rely on the flash to freeze the movement and we're not getting a kind of blur from any ambient light that comes in too. So I'm probably going to use more than one light here and build up the brightness by having several lights on a lower power. Remember, the lower the power, the faster the flash duration. Now for shots like this, it can be a bit of a delicate dance with all of your settings to get the right exposure. Now remember, it's the flash that's freezing the movement, not your shutter speed, so it doesn't have to be really high. However, remember it's got to be high enough to shut out the ambient light in the room. Now the next thing is your aperture. Now it's all good and well that we freeze the movement, but if we're still getting blur from depth of field, then kind of defeats the objective of what we're doing. So we want to make sure that when we're photographing something that moves, we also have the depth of field to capture that and we don't lose what's nearer the camera or further away. We want it all to be as sharp as possible. Now that may also mean that we have to come up on our ISO to allow us to shut down on the aperture. So in this video with Jessica, who's a professional gymnast, we're going to try two shots. One where she is jumping, so I'm going to be adding some rim lights around the side of her. And the second shot, we're going to be actually really freezing the movement of chalk. So lots of particles are going to go absolutely everywhere. And for me, I want to make sure that every single one of those is crystal clear and perfectly frozen. So I'm definitely going to be relying on flash duration for that. So for this shot, what we're going to do is Jess is going to do what's called a sheep jump, where she basically is sort of put her arms behind her head and her feet come all the way back up. Now, what I'm going to do is try to capture her mid-air and freeze absolutely everything, even her hair. I want to make sure everything is frozen. So the setup for this, I've got two rim lights. I've got a 1x3 and another 1x3 at the back. So they're pointing to just sort of get the outline of Jess here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is put the 2x3 over the top of Jess. Now I've got this boomed as high as possible, being really careful. It's got a counterweight on it, but we have actually put a bag full of Jess's clothes on the edge of the boom arm to be absolutely just extra safe because I've got it right over the top of her head. So the idea is that this light over here, when she jumps and her arms go backwards, this is going to be lighting her face, basically all of the top part. And these lights back here are going to act as the sort of rim light behind her. So it's a 3-light setup. All of them are in freeze mode. So we make sure that we actually are cutting that flash duration really, really short. So all of them are in freeze mode. So now all I need to do is make sure that no ambient light is in the room and it's just the flash that's affecting the image. And so much so they can be on really low power and really freeze the movement. Now with Jess in position, I want to double check the placement of the lights. I've also added some black V-flats to prevent any light bouncing off the white studio walls. You count me in then, Jess, so ready when you are. 3, 2, 1. To me, this is already looking great. All of the movement is completely frozen, but I can notice that cooler tone of the shorter flash duration from freeze mode. That looks cool, I love that. Okay, so that was the 4, and then that was actually jump. So
good. Now I probably want on my side, my feet.
Ever the perfectionist, Jess now explains to me exactly how the perfect jump should be captured before we try again. This is teamwork between us to get it just right. I'm just going to change the colour balance because it looks a little bit cool. So let's just warm that up just a little bit. So when you're ready, you count me in again, girl.
3, 2, 1.
This time I've managed to get the timing just right, as apparently Jess's feet should almost touch her head. If we compare both frames, you can see how I've compensated for the cooler tone of the flash by changing my white balance. Of course you could do this in post if you shoot raw, but I'm all about getting it looking as good as I can in camera. So we're sticking with a similar setup now, but Jess is going to try another jump. Now to mix it up a bit, what I've decided to do is pop a couple of gels into those strip lights at the back. So I've got a peacock blue in my left and also a rose pink in the right. So that's just going to give it a little bit more dimension and just change the feel of the image really. So what we're going to do now is give this a go, same setup as before. The only thing I've had to change is when I've added the gels onto the backlights, the gels will eat a little bit of power. So I've had to turn them up from power 2 to power 3. This one is still on 2 at the top though. So let's give this a go. Let me turn off the ambient light in the room. All right, so let's just get back in business and just get you focused up. All right, cool. All right, so this is, one leg's coming out the front, one leg's going out the back, right?
Yes.
Okay, right, let's see what happens. All right, I'm not sure how this is gonna look. Yeah, okay, go for it. All right, count me in.
3, 2, 1.
I really love the shape of this jump, and thankfully Jess's foot just makes it onto the black paper. To give me more room, I can extend the paper roll further so we have more clearance when she jumps. For this particular shot, I was able to extend the black in Photoshop for the desired effect. So for this shot, I want to take a portrait of Jess, and whilst I'm going to do this sort of typical 3-light setup, I want to make it just a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to introduce some chalk. Now this is the kind of chalk that you would see gymnasts have to get extra grip on their hands and what she would use before performing. So the first thing I'm going to do though is set up the 2 rim lights around the back. Then I'm going to add the light in the front to light Jess up. And then what we're going to do is make sure that we get the fastest flash duration possible, because I want to make sure that I freeze every single little piece of this chalk as it flies through the air. So the first thing we're going to do is just get the background exposure on those lights. Okay, so that's just the side lights. Okay, they look nice and even, that's good. Right, now let's just turn those off. So that is group B. Let's turn those off and put head A on our key light. Just make sure this one's looking good as well. Hang there for me, Jess. Wonderful. And let's try all lights together. Oh, that's off. There we go, all lights together. Oh, double flash. Right, good. Okay, yep, that's gonna work. Right, so all of our modelling lights are set to dim when we fire. Let's just make sure I'm on rapid shooting. Yes, I am. Okay. And I'm going to come out. I'm actually going to frame a bit further back because I do not want to miss this. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Whilst this is kind of cool for a first attempt, I can immediately see a problem. So the first couple of shots have been great. However, as predicted, what happened is 6.3 just isn't going to be enough for us. So what we decided to do instead is to take it up to about F10 and raise up the ISO to about 1250. So that should allow me a little bit more room in the depth of field. Now what we could start doing is, instead of raising the ISO up, we could start adding in more lights. However, it's just not practical. We've up to 3 lights already. For this shot, it's be kind of ridiculous to start adding more and more and more. So I have to work with what we have. Now the other thing I've decided to do is actually put the camera onto a tripod so that I can set focus, lock it off, and then I can just really push the button down and make the most out of this flash duration and get as many frames as possible without the camera trying to hunt. So we're going to try again at F10 and see if we get some better results. All right, focus is set, locked off. All right, when you are ready, Jess, count me in.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, Jess, that was a good one. This is much better, as now the chalk is focused too and still completely frozen. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Very good, Jess. Whilst this is a great shot to show the impact of the chalk, I feel it's still in the show a little and feels less like a portrait. Maybe that I'm lucky. Is it good? Well done, Jess. Let's lock that off. Okay. When you are ready. 3, 2, 1. Oh, good. Oh, she meant that one. This is much more what I had in mind. We see the chalk frozen, but also the dust cloud from the impact. This for me works well, as we still see Jess's face and it feels much more like a portrait. By going in close, we can really see the effect. Remember, the camera's shutter speed for this shot is only 1/100th of a second, so this frozen movement is all down to that short flash duration. So I hope that's given you a better understanding of how flash duration works and how you can use it to create some really sharp, fantastic movement shots and to really freeze the action.